Chairman, earlier Minister for Manpower outlined how MOM will strengthen our efforts to ensure workforce and workplace resilience. First, by uplifting our low-wage workers. Second, by ensuring good workplace safety practices. And third, by enhancing our employees' mental well-being. We have made good progress in supporting our low-wage workers. In the decade from 2009 to 2019, low-wage workers saw higher income growth than the average worker. This has helped to reduce income inequality and bears testament to the government's multi-layered approach to support our low-wage workers. Workfare Income Supplement, which the government introduced in 2007, laid the foundations to supplement the incomes of our low-wage workers. It casts a wide net covering full-time and part-time employees, as well as the self-employed. In 2020, about 440,000 people were eligible for workfare as long as they earned less than $2,300 a month and met all other eligibility criteria. It supplements workers' wages by up to 30%, depending on income and age. On top of workfare, we have the progressive wage model, or PWM, and workfare skill support. Although the COVID-19 pandemic has tempered progress, we are fortunate that there has been broad-based preservation of jobs and employability. This has not been the experience elsewhere. At its peak, the unemployment rate for OECD countries was 3.6 percentage points higher than pre-COVID-19 levels, whereas in Singapore, the increase was smaller at 1.6 percentage points. To cushion the impact of the incomes of low-wage workers last year, the government assisted them with the one-off workfare special payment of $3,000 fully in cash on top of regular workfare payouts. In total, approximately 500,000 workers benefited from about $1.5 billion of workfare special payments. Such an effort has certainly supported our low-wage workers in these challenging times. But we are not out of the woods yet. Keeping our low-wage workers employed must continue to be our highest priority. And we have done so through measures like the Job Support Scheme, which has helped to keep our unemployment rate low. Keeping this priority in mind, we should take careful steps to raise the wages of our low-wage workers. Especially in a time like this, we must not trifle with careless moves that would risk them being unemployed instead. We will continue to build on workfare and extend the PWM to cover more workers. This combination is a sustainable way to uplift our low-wage workers through better wages and better work conditions. Take our security officers, for example. Since January this year, security firms are no longer granted overtime exemption, or OTE. This means that a security officer can only work up to 72 overtime hours a month, instead of the previous industry norm of 95 hours. While security officers would have been heartened by this move, many were also concerned about the impact on their wages, because many relied on OT pay for their gross incomes. To mitigate the impact of reduced overtime hours on wages, the tripartite partners agreed to a $150 increase in the PWM basic wage floor, double that in preceding years. And more security officers also saw even higher wages. What this means is that security officers can now work fewer overtime hours while maintaining their gross monthly wages. I'm thankful to both the labour movement and security employers for continuing these changes despite the current challenging business climate. Mr. Alvin Goh is one of many who have benefited. When he joined the industry in 2017, he worked 6 days each week, averaging 94 overtime hours a month. Mr. Goh was earning about $1,800 in gross wages then, with some additional support from workfare. Today, because of PWM, Mr. Goh works up to 72 overtime hours a month, a significant reduction of 22 hours. This means 2 additional rest days a month, which he uses to spend more time to rest and spend more time with his family. Thanks to PWM wage increases, and his progression up the PWM ladder, his gross wages today has increased by more than 50% from the $1,800 he was earning in 2017 to about $2,800 today. Besides improved working conditions, many of us have witnessed the transformation of job roles in the sector, from jagas who perform largely caretaking functions to security officers who are skilled professionals enabled by technology today. Careful implementation of the PWM has also helped to avoid negative employment effects. We have seen the growth of more locals joining the sector of around 6% a year from 2015 to 2021. The progressive wages approach, with workfare as a foundation, has benefited the security sector, employers and security officers who have seen better career prospects, wages, and work conditions. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll just refer all members to the brochures or the sheets that we've given out, detailing our efforts to support low-wage workers. The story of Mr. Alvin Goh and others like him bear testament to the value of building on workfare to adopt progressive wages. The tripartite work group on low-wage workers have also been working hard to ensure that our low-wage workers can emerge stronger together with the rest of Singapore. Presently, our existing PWMs cover around 85,000 workers. Dr. Koh Poh Kun and Ms. Yeo Wan Ling asked if the wages and prospects of our low-wage workers in the food services and retail sectors could be uplifted. NTUC Secretary General Ng Chee Meng also expressed similar sentiments recently. We have been studying the extension of the PWM to more sectors. In my COS speech last year, I reiterated our intention to do so when business conditions were more favorable. We were at the cusp at the beginning of the COVID pandemic last year. Now, as we strive to emerge stronger from the pandemic, I'm pleased to announce that the tripartite work group has agreed to extend the PWM to the food services and retail sectors. These sectors are among the sectors with the largest numbers of low-wage workers. We estimate that these PWMs could cover up to 80,000 local workers. The work group also recognizes NTUC's aspirations for the PWMs to be implemented within 2 to 3 years. And we have convened the tripartite cluster committees for each of these sectors, which will recommend an implementation timeline, taking on board all stakeholders' concerns, including market conditions. The tripartite cluster committees will target to submit their recommendations on the timeline and other implementation details to the government by the end of the year. In good part because of the PWM, the median gross monthly wages of cleaners have seen cumulative real growth of 37% since 2013 to $1,388 in 2019. For security officers, we saw cumulative real wage growth of 29% since 2015 to $2,391 in 2019. And we are confident that our local workers in the food services and retail sectors will likewise see a meaningful uplift to their wages in time to come. We also welcome NTUC's strong commitment in expanding the PWM, and we look forward to the NTUC bringing on board their social enterprises such as NTUC Food Fair and Fair Price when we expand the food services and retail PWMs along with other progressive employers. Even as the tripartite partners work through the details, we recognize that our approach will need to be balanced. During my consultations with the industry, many food services and retail employers supported the imperative to do more for our low-wage workers in their sectors. I'm heartened by the support. At the same time, we are also mindful that while some firms are doing very well, others may still be more at a nascent stage of recovery. So our intentions must therefore be carefully calibrated. It must be meaningful for the worker, but it must also be viable for our SMEs. So we will pay close attention to the potential impact of PWM on business costs. The government will do its part to support the transition alongside employers and consumers. We will also consult extensively with employers and unions and be sensitive to existing industry practices, such as incentive-based wage remuneration, like commissions, for example, when designing the PWM in these sectors. Today, all cleaners, security officers, and landscape workers of licensed and registered cleaning, security, and landscape firms benefit from being paid at least PWM wages. Other companies may also employ staff in-house to perform these roles, such as hotels and F&B outlets, which are not covered under existing PWMs. So the work group fully agrees with Dr. Koh Poh Koon that it will make sense to extend the existing PWMs to benefit up to 50,000 of such workers. We intend to consult key affected sectors on a suitable timeline to move forward. To the questions from Mr. Louis Ng and Mr. Fahmi Aliman, I wish to reinforce the government's ambition to eventually cover all sectors with progressive wages on top of workfare as a fundamental layer of support for our low-wage workers. We are starting in sectors with the highest proportions of low-wage workers in the workforce and identifying ways to expand beyond these sectors. We also recognize that there are low-wage workers employed in similar occupations but distributed in other sectors. So we are studying practical ways to cover various occupational groups under progressive wages, and will share more when ready. To the figures Mr. Gerald Giam quoted yesterday, the discrepancy arises because of coverage. So part-time employees work fewer hours, so their gross wages would naturally be lower. Similarly, for self-employed persons, the nature of their earnings and their working hours are not comparable. But let's also look at the big picture. The wages of our low-wage workers have not stagnated in the past decade. We have seen our efforts improve the wages of all Singaporeans, and we have seen progress at the bottom 10% and at the bottom 20%. So just to give you some idea, the bottom 20% of wages increased by 39% in real terms in the last decade, 2009 to 2019. And at P10, wages increased by 37% in real terms, same period. So that's really the big picture, that our wages of our low-wage workers have not stagnated, they have gone up, and we will continue to help them progress. But regardless of how the numbers differ, the important point is that low-wage workers also receive the workfare support. And in time to come, our aim is to cover them through progressive wages too. Nevertheless, more broadly, I thank Mr. Gerald Giam for his consistent support of the PWM since 2014. I believe he was an NCMP when he commented on its launch. We share similar objectives, even if our methods and our approaches may differ. Mr. Giam may have the impression that there's little risk of disemployment when higher PWM wages are mandated. It is precisely because of the calibrated way in which we have rolled out PWM, negotiated with the industry and the labour movement, have we been able to avoid disemployment and improve wage outcomes in which the market can bear. Where feasible, the tripartite partners make positive improvements to the work conditions, as I shared earlier with the security sector, which in turn promotes more local hiring. So it's a win for the employer, a win for the worker, and also a win for the service buyer and hopefully consumers in future. The government stands ready to support, to ease the transition for firms, including training support. And that is why sectoral tripartite consultations are critical. As for Mr. Edward Chia, I agree when he cautioned that businesses, especially our SMEs, must be given a reasonable runway to adjust and prepare for the PWM. I thank him for his support, and I also want to assure him that this is exactly how we prevent problems. I hope that Mr. Giam will appreciate the delicate balance involved and the work group members who are working hard to act responsibly. The work group will also study how to ensure that wage growth in PWM sectors continues to outpace median wage growth, so that our aim is really to narrow the wage gap amongst our workers and strengthen the cohesion in our society. Mr. Chairman, the PWMs currently benefit 85,000 workers. In the short term, we will be at least doubling the coverage up to 218,000 workers. More importantly, it remains our aspiration to cover all sectors with progressive wages in the longer term, on top of workfare as the fundamental layer of support for all our low-wage workers. The work group expects to conclude its deliberations and issue its recommendations to government to do so before the end of the year. Uplifting our low-wage workers is a whole-of-society effort. Employers and workers must continue to be committed to job redesign and upskilling. As consumers, let us also recognize our responsibility. I'm heartened that the government poll conducted early this year found that even amidst the pandemic, a considerable amount of proportion of respondents, 39%, were willing to pay more for goods and services to help low-wage workers receive higher wages. 42% were neutral, 19% were not prepared to do so. Though there are many Singaporeans willing to pay more, but we can see that the support is not so clear-cut. So as a nation, it is important that we stand in solidarity with our low-wage workers. So I urge all members of this House, across parties, to help build consensus among Singaporeans that this is but a small price to bear together for a fairer and more cohesive society. At the same time, the extension of the PWM to these sectors is not an excuse for companies to indiscriminately raise prices, which Dr. Koh and Mr. Singh are rightly concerned about. I fully agree. With the expansion of PWM to the public-facing retail and food services sectors, we will study options with relevant agencies to keep a close watch on indiscriminate profiteering. To Mr. Singh's specific query on lift maintenance contracts, today there is no requirement for Town Council to procure services from any particular firm, though I recognize that some firms specialize in particular lift models. Authorized dealers are required to supply parts to other players on fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms. Town councils can also compare prices between firms to make informed decisions or awarding contracts. Agencies will look into any unjustified contract hikes, and Mr. Singh can offer us details to follow up if there are. So more broadly, Mr. Singh's example brings to bear 2 points. First, since introducing PWM for the sector through government procurement in 2019, we have seen median gross monthly wages for full-time resident lift technicians rise from around $3,300 in 2017 to about $3,800 in 2019. But at the same time, our efforts may have some impact to consumer prices. So this highlights why careful deliberation by tripartite partners is necessary as we expand to more PWMs. No company should unjustly profit from the PWM, but we must also recognize that these moves will not be without cost. That is why workfare continues to be important, as consumers and service buyers do not bear the cost impact of the wage supplements. All of us have a role to play as our low-wage workers enjoy better wages, dignity, and respect. So I agree, Mr. Raj Thomas, that seeking the well-being of our fellow worker must be part of our culture. The government will partner the community in this effort, and with this in mind, the work group has called for formation of the Alliance for Action for Low-Wage Workers. The AFA will mobilize passionate, action-oriented people to contribute to the whole of society effort to uplift low-wage workers. The government supports the work group's call, and we will launch the AFA soon and run co-creation workshops for AFA members over the next 6 months to start these ground-up initiatives. Mr. Chairman, moving on to workplace safety. MOM is alarmed at the recent spate of workplace accidents. The ministry is investigating every accident, and we call on the whole industry to seriously review your safety protocols. We acknowledge that companies are facing manpower shortages due to border and pandemic controls. Nevertheless, companies must not compromise worker safety by rushing or having workers operate machinery or perform tasks that they are not trained for. They should also review their risk assessments to account for COVID-19 conditions. Since mid-December 2020, MOM has stepped up enforcement. Out of 510 inspections since mid-December, MOM has uncovered 486 contraventions and issued 7 stop work orders. No company should be complacent. Since last November, Wish Council and industry associations have called for 2 safety timeouts to improve safety protocols. We are particularly concerned with the Tuas explosion on 24th February, resulting in multiple casualties. It was one of the worst accidents in recent years. Our inspectors have commenced inspections on close to 500 companies that may have combustible dust hazards. And this is to ensure that risks are minimized. The Minister for Manpower will appoint an inquiry committee to thoroughly study the case and recommend prevention measures, including policy or regulatory changes if necessary. Mr. Melvin Yong asked about workplace safety among subcontractors. Subcontractors are not the only ones responsible for workplace safety and health. Main contractors must also be responsible for ensuring overall safety across their work sites, including managing the safety performance of subcontractors on their sites. To motivate both main and subcontractors to improve their workplace safety practices, MOM launched the CheckSafe e-service in January this year to make construction companies' safety track records readily available. This way, developers and main contractors can make more informed decisions in appointing safer subcontractors. We intend to expand this and other services and to other sectors for service buyers to influence wish outcomes through their choice of contractors. For construction fatalities involving subcontractor workers, we will also prosecute the main contractor if they fail in their duty to ensure safety of workers on the site. Later this year, MOM will release a framework emphasizing safety performance for public sector construction tenders. In this way, safer companies will have better access to business opportunities, and I hope that the private sector will follow suit in due course. This approach is an important complement to deterrent penalties in wish prosecutions. The maximum penalty for wish acts offences have increased from 250,000 in 2016 to 400,000 in 2019. And based on MOM's inspections, almost all companies have appointed a Safe Management Officer, or SMO. So we support Mr. Melvin Yong's suggestion that companies could consider upskilling the SMOs to become wish representatives through courses such as the WSQ Certificate in Workplace Safety and Health, or through participating in the BizSafe program for which training subsidies are available. Mr. Chairman, Singapore has come a long way in our workplace safety and health standards. Since the Nickel Highway collapse in 2004, our workplace fatal injury rate reduced from 4.9 per 100,000 workers to 1.1 per 100,000 workers in 2019. This is a level achieved only by a handful of developed countries. But still, we must never be complacent. We remain committed in our goal in making Singapore one of the safest workplaces in the world. Mr. Chairman, the COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us of the importance of ensuring workforce and workplace resilience. For its part, the government is committed to continue leading efforts to uplift our low-wage workers, to ensure good workplace safety practices, and to enhance employees' mental well-being, not just for the benefit of every worker, but also for the good of employers and society at large.